Imagine scrolling through your phone. A vacation, a baby announcement, a plate of food that somehow looks better than anything you've ever cooked. And then, there's that one person. You know the one. They never post. No life updates. No relationship announcements. No blurry concert videos. No carefully angled coffee photos. No inspirational quotes written in white font over a sunset. And yet somehow they are alive. They have friends. They go places. They experience things. You might even see them at a party, laughing, fully engaged, not once reaching for their phone like it's an emotional support animal. So what's going on in their heads? These people often use social media. They just don't perform on it. And psychology has a lot to say about why. Chapter 1. They don't see life as content. Let's start with the biggest mental difference. People who don't post their life events often don't see their experiences as content. To them, a birthday is a birthday. A trip is a trip. A promotion is a promotion, not a post opportunity. Psychologists call this difference in motivation intrinsic versus extrinsic orientation. People who post frequently are often responding to external rewards. Likes, comments, validation, acknowledgement. These rewards activate the brain's dopamine system, which reinforces the behavior. But non-posters are more intrinsically oriented. Their satisfaction comes from the experience itself, not from how it's received by an audience. When something good happens, their first thought is not, I should share this. Their first thought is, I'm enjoying this. Research on self-determination theory shows that people who prioritize internal fulfillment over external approval are less likely to seek public validation. They don't feel the need to turn moments into proof. In simple terms, they don't feel invisible if nobody sees it online. They don't feel that a moment only counts if it's witnessed digitally. They're not thinking, if I don't post this, did it even happen? To them, yes, it happened. That's enough. Chapter 2. They separate identity from performance. Social media encourages us to perform identity. We don't just exist online. We curate, we edit, we select, we become a highlight reel version of ourselves. People who don't post much are often very aware of this performance aspect, and they consciously opt out. Psychological research on self-presentation shows that constant public sharing creates pressure to maintain a coherent brand. Even personal accounts slowly turn into identity projects. Non-posters often find this exhausting. They don't want to think about how an experience fits into a narrative about who they are supposed to be. They don't want to ask questions like, does this align with my vibe? Or, is this on brand for me now? They just want to live. They also tend to have a more stable internal sense of self. Studies show that people with higher self-concept clarity feel less need to seek affirmation through public feedback. They already know who they are. They don't need to remind the internet. And yes, sometimes they watch everyone else posting and think, wow, that looks tiring. Chapter 3. They don't confuse connection with exposure. One of the biggest myths of social media is that posting equals connection. Psychologically, that's not actually true. Research consistently shows that passive consumption and performative sharing do not reliably increase feelings of closeness or belonging. In many cases, they increase loneliness. People who don't post often understand this intuitively. They don't feel more connected when 300 people like their vacation photo. They feel connected when someone asks how the trip was and actually listens to the answer. For them, connection is interactive, not broadcast-based. They prefer conversations over announcements. They'd rather tell 5 people something meaningful than tell 500 people something shallow. This doesn't mean they're antisocial. In fact, many of them are very socially active. They just invest their energy differently. They text, they call, they meet in person, they send long voice notes, they remember details, they follow up. They don't outsource their social life to an algorithm. Chapter 4. They are highly aware of the audience problem. Here's something social psychology talks about a lot: imagined audiences. When you post on social media, you're technically posting to everyone: friends, coworkers, distant relatives, strangers, your ex, your boss, your old math teacher, and that one person who never likes anything but somehow sees everything. For many non-posters, this mental audience is deeply uncomfortable. They don't like the idea of collapsing all social contexts into one public space. This is known as context collapse, and research shows it creates anxiety and self-censorship.
They don't want to explain their life to people who are no longer part of it.
They don't want to manage who interprets their milestones and how. They don't want their joy, grief, or growth consumed without consent. So instead of negotiating that complexity, they choose privacy. Not secrecy. Privacy. They still share, just selectively, intentionally, with people who are actually involved. Chapter 5. They don't rely on digital memory. For many people, posting is a form of memory storage. Photos become proof. Captions become timelines. Social media becomes an external hard drive for life. But people who don't post tend to rely on internal memory and personal archives instead. They take photos, but for themselves. They journal. They keep messages. They remember moments emotionally rather than publicly. Psychological studies on memory show that constant documentation can actually reduce present moment engagement. When we focus on capturing an experience, we experience it less deeply. Non-posters often prefer full presence over documentation. They are more likely to think, "I want to remember how this felt," rather than, "I need to record how this looked." They don't outsource memory to an audience. Chapter 6. They are not all the same. Yes, really. Let's be clear. Not everyone who doesn't post is doing it for deep psychological reasons. Some are private by nature. Some had bad experiences online. Some just don't care. Some are overwhelmed. Some forgot their password and never looked back. But research does show certain trends. Non-posters are often more reflective, more selective with attention, and more sensitive to emotional boundaries. They are less motivated by social comparison. They are less likely to measure their worth through visibility. They may still scroll, they may still watch, but they don't feel compelled to participate.
And importantly, this is not moral superiority.
It's preference. Chapter 7. How they stay socially active without posting. This is the part people always get wrong. They assume non-posters are isolated. They are not. They just practice socializing differently. They invest in fewer relationships, but deeper ones. They show up consistently. They remember birthdays without needing reminders from an app. They have inside jokes that don't make sense outside the group, and therefore never become content. They may be less visible, but they are not less connected. Social psychology research shows that relationship quality matters far more than relationship quantity. Non-posters often intuitively follow this rule. They don't confuse attention with intimacy. Another important psychological trait that shows up again and again in research is confidence rooted in self-perception rather than public reaction. People who don't post their lives online often have a clearer, more stable relationship with how they see themselves. Their sense of worth doesn't rise and fall with engagement numbers, because it was never built there in the first place. Psychologists describe this as internal self-validation, where confidence comes from personal values, lived experiences, and private self-reflection rather than applause. When something goes wrong, they don't feel publicly diminished, and when something goes right, they don't feel incomplete without recognition. Their identity feels solid, even when it's unseen. Chapter 8. Their quiet rebellion. In a culture that rewards constant visibility, not posting is a form of quiet rebellion. Not aggressive, not announced, just quietly opting out. They are not rejecting people. They are rejecting the pressure to turn their lives into updates. They don't believe silence means absence. They don't believe privacy means loneliness. They don't believe worth requires witnesses. And honestly, psychology suggests they might be onto something. The people who don't post their lives online are not hiding.
They're living.
They're thinking. They're choosing connection over exposure. And the next time you wonder what someone's been up to because their profile is quiet, the answer might be simple. They're busy experiencing their life instead of proving it. And no, they probably don't need you to like it. Fade out. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more and hit like if you enjoyed this video. See you next time.